I have an issue with Freddy Fazbear. I know that sounds crazy. As Freddy Fazbear's strongest soldier, you wouldn't ever think that I would say something like that. But it's true. I do think there is an issue with Freddy Fazbear. And that issue is, Freddy, ever since the first game, has never been the main antagonist. Throughout the series, he's always been a figure of some sort. I don't think there's a single FNAF game out there that he's not in. I guess that wouldn't make sense because the name of the game is literally Five Nights at Freddy's. But I feel like as the game got more lore-based, he kind of just stepped out of the spotlight and it became a bit more about other people than it did Freddy. Freddy by himself isn't bad. There's nothing wrong with Freddy Fazbear. There is something wrong with how Freddy is portrayed throughout the series. After the first game drop, there was always another character that was a main antagonist rather than him. FNAF 2, I would say, was more focused around the puppet. There were a lot of animatronics in that game, but I think the puppet was the one that everybody worried about. The mechanic for the puppet required you to always think about them.
Don't forget the music box. I'll be honest, I never liked that puppet thing. It's always thinking, and it can go anywhere. I don't think the Freddy mask will fool it, so just don't forget the music box. Anyway, I'm sure it won't be a problem. Have a good day.
The third game was Springtrap, since, Springtrap was the only animatronic that could actually kill you in the game. In FNAF 4, there was Fredbear and Nightmare, which I guess you can say are similar, but we'll just say Fredbear. You could argue that Freddy had his own little unique mechanic that you had to look back on him to get the little frettles off of the bed, but to argue that, Foxy had his own mechanic, which was in the closet, so I feel like that's not really a great argument. Sister location, it was Circus Baby, obviously. Even though you can never get jump scared by Circus Baby, it was more focused on like Elizabeth and Circus Baby's character, since she would guide you throughout the game, only to end up tricking you and getting you scooped. Even in FNAF World, in which I don't care what anybody says, that game is goated. Freddy wasn't even the main antagonist or the main character in that game. Granted, it's an RPG, so I guess it's a little different. I know the game got a lot more lore based. I feel like that's kind of why Freddy kind of became more of a side character, if anything. You can clearly tell in the first game, since Scott didn't expect the original game to go anywhere, that Freddy really was meant to be the main antagonist. And although there are a couple unique characters in the game as well, like Foxy and Golden Freddy, Freddy himself still had this very intimidating, ominous presence in the game. He didn't attack you till night 3. Even how he moved around, it was just so different from the other animatronic. Bonnie and Chica were still an idol in the other rooms, whereas Freddy was always in the shadows. You never really saw him. Even when he was in the camera on your blind side, he was still a shadowy figure of some sort. You never really saw his main look until you got jump scared or if he was still on stage. He even had sound cues for every time he moved. And when he got to your door, he would only go back once, and that's to the hallway, and he wouldn't go anywhere else from there. If I remember correctly, I think he does look at you at some point. I know there's a trailer where it shows all three of them looking at you, but I think Freddy does actually look at you. When the game came out first, yeah, everybody was kind of scary, but like, you all knew since the game was called Five Nights at Freddy's, once you actually had to deal with Freddy, that's when it really started to kick in. Ever since that game, he just was never the same. As soon as the second game hit, he was put as a side character. Even Toy Freddy didn't have much of an impact, even though I will say Toy Freddy is pretty scary in his own way. In FNAF 3, he sidelined even harder, which makes sense because it's more about Springtrap. In FNAF 4, there's a little resemblance because I guess the main antagonist is still a bear, but that's not Freddy Fazbear, but it is Fredbear, which is kind of like the predecessor. It's still Freddy Fazbear at the end of the day, and Freddy was just not the main character or the main antagonist, which really does kind of ruins the whole reasoning for using the name Five Nights at Freddy's. Maybe you could use Five Nights at Freddy's for the second game, but I feel like after that, there's just no reason to use the name. Why even call it Five Nights at Freddy's 3 when you can just call it Fazbear Frights? That would probably make a lot more sense, because it's not pointing to Freddy in any way, it's just the name of the new building. But I guess it would be kind of weird to come up with a different name for each game, and I guess Scott just didn't feel like doing that, especially with the rate that he was putting out the games. Do you know how much more sense it would have made if he just just named the game's sister location instead of Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. It just doesn't make sense to me to kind of use his name without him being the main antagonist in any way. He kind of sits on the bench until Security Breach, where he's actually a protagonist instead of an antagonist, which is good, don't get me wrong, especially with, you know, how new FNAF is. But I feel like the first Freddy Fazbear and Glamrock Freddy are just so different. I feel like none of the new Freddys have done it better than the OG Freddy Fazbear. I feel like in some way, especially with the later games, there could be some way to make Freddy still very interesting and still in some way a very important antagonist instead of just kind of throwing him on the sideline. So many animatronics across the games had their own little unique thing, and I feel like people really loved that, which really pushed Freddy away. Like for FNAF 2, not only was there the puppet, there was the new toy animatronics. Toy Chica kind of stole the spotlight for, you know, reasons. Withered Bonnie had his whole no mask thing. There was Mangle, which was just, didn't really expect that character to just be here. There were the Easter eggs with Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie. Due to the overabundance of animatronics in the second game, Freddy just really had no place in the game that made him stand out. Even Toy Freddy had like something a little unique where his eye would roll back and they'd turn black. I thought that made him a lot more scary. In the third game, I feel like he sidelined the hardest, understandably so, but like his mechanics literally just, you can't focus on him, or if you stare at him, he'll jump scare you. In FNAF 4, Nightmare Fredbear kind of stole Freddy's thunder, you know, having his whole sound cues, his really terrifying looks when he's at your door. He even does Freddy's job better than him, because his head right there is way scarier than those little Freddle thingies. One thing I will say though, there have been a lot of memes made about him, which I'm really happy about. Not really sure what you guys think about it, you know, you can let me know if you want. And to all the other Fazbear Federals, stay strong out there, okay? We really need to keep his name in the limelight, dog. We need to get him out there. We need to keep him in the spotlight. And remember, Freddy is love. Freddy is life. There should be a Freddy Fazbear G Fuel flavor. And you know what? They should work with me to create it.